Okay, so we'll just get started, and I'll move along with some of the notes that I've prepared to share today, and I'll start with introduction. So you can see I'm Nicole Medor. I'm the early childhood specialist at the DOE, and I have Marcy here. Marcy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcy Whitcomb. I am the early childhood monitor at the Department of Education.
And I have Leanne Larson. Perfect. Hi, Leanne. Thanks.
Nicole. Sorry about that, Nicole. Hi, everybody. I'm Leanne Larson. I'm the early learning team coordinator, where it's the team that Nicole and Marcy are on, and where all of our pre-K to grade 5 specialists are based. And it's really nice to be here. And I'm going to apologize up front. I'm going to be listening, but I also have to pay attention to a bill that's in a hearing this afternoon. So every once in a while, I may have to divert over there. So I'm just going to keep my camera off so you don't see me like going back and forth looking like I'm swimming somewhere. But I am trying to focus on this session too.
Multitasking. Thank you, Leanne. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen because I did prepare, like I said, just some notes to sort of help keep me on track and make sure I address everything that I think is necessary in terms of learning more about the program. So this is just a quick timeline of the development, and actually let me get out of this mode here. Of the development of pre-K for me over time. You may or may not be aware that it is developed in partnership with folks from the Boston Public School Department. They started this work way back in 2005. They adopted the OWL curriculum, so similar to what you were saying in your program, Erin, same probably. And they also adopted building blocks for math at that time. And then over time, over the next 9 to 10 years or so, they worked to create a curriculum for their Boston public schools and the students, of course, that attend those schools. So they called their curriculum Focus on Early Learning. And they have programs for classrooms who have students from ages 3 and up. So they've developed this through the 2nd grade. And I believe the last time we went to tour some of their classrooms, oh gosh, a year or so, 2 years ago now probably. And I believe they were piloting at the time in grade 3. I'm not sure, honestly, how the pandemic has potentially affected that. So for right now on their Boston Public Schools site, anybody can access their age 3 through 2nd grade curriculum. And so if you go to that site, which I have pulled up and I can show you if we have time towards the end, you'll notice that what we call pre-K, what we call kindergarten, etc., they call KO, K1, K2. So KO is for 3-year-olds. K1, I believe, is what we consider pre-K for 4-year-olds. And then K2 is their traditional kindergarten classroom. So if you notice that, just don't look for pre-K, look for K1. So obviously inspired by their work, and they did have their program evaluated in their Boston Public Schools, and the research is available on that site as well. Again, I can show you if we have time. Inspired by that, we were hoping to do something similar here in Maine, primarily because, similar to what Lori was saying, in a lot of our public pre-K classrooms, teachers are utilizing either multiple purchased programs or are developing something from scratch on their own, both of which are a lot of work, whether you're trying to create something day to day with some type of scope and sequence that's aligned to our standards, or if you're just adopting a program or multiple programs and trying to follow those with fidelity. They both require a ton of work, a ton of attention and money. So wanting to address that for our state, we thought that doing something similar to what Boston did could really be a benefit for so many of our programs. So with the help of some federal funding in 2015, we were able to do just that. So over the course of those 2 or 3 years there, from 2015 to 2018, we partnered with folks from the Boston Public Schools system and adapted their focus on early learning to be appropriate for students here in Maine. As you can imagine, students in Boston attend inner city schools. It's not rural by any definition of the word. And so some of the lessons, some of the books, some of the content that was created for Focus on Early Learning didn't transfer well to all of our students and all of our experiences here in Maine. So those are the types of things that we wanted to make sure were updated and relevant for our students. So those are some of the major changes. And then we piloted that PreK for Me in school year 2018. Laurie mentioned RSU 57. They were a big part of that pilot program for us, as well as some other schools. And then in 2019, we had West Ed review the program, and they've since made those results public on the preschool curriculum consumer report. So that is housed on the National Head Start site. And it's basically, it's a report, but it's sort of like a booklet, for lack of a better word, that highlights different curriculum, different programs that is suitable for students who are 4 years old. And it looks at different criteria. I've pulled it up to share, and I can show you where you can find that as well as an additional resource. And so we're really excited that PreK for Me is now part of that. So anybody that's looking to implement a new program in their PreK classroom, and if they're curious what exists out there and it compares curricula to each other, PreK for Me is there now. So that was really a huge accomplishment for us, which also means, I'll add to that, that because it's in the curriculum consumer report and has been reviewed by West Ed, it's an approved program for Head Start classrooms. That was another big part of our work, because we wanted to make sure that all of our partnerships classrooms would have access to this, because we felt it was appropriate for those settings as well. So some of the guiding principles for PreK for Me, it's really focused, of course, around young children and their capability of complex higher order thinking. It's incredibly literacy rich. Every unit of study, every lesson revolves around specific literature for children. And we'll get to that in another couple more slides as well. We look at it as the children are active participants in their learning. We, the educators, are guiding their learning. We're taking the interactions and the conversations that we have with them on a day-to-day basis and morphing that to connect it back to the content of the unit and the content of what we know is best practice for their development. So we're really taking their learning and rolling with it. It's meaningful knowledge is constructed through robust interactions and high engagement. So any teacher that's looking to implement this is gonna be working. There's very little time for organizing your desk, very little time for taking a phone call or taking a break or anything like that. I know our educators aren't doing that. My point being that throughout all of the components of PreK for Me, it revolves highly around teacher interactions with children. The instruction is impactful because the teachers become researchers for their classrooms. So all together, and Erin, this would probably look really familiar to you from OWL. There are 6 units of study, and they do have the same titles that the 2005 version of OWL has. So you'll see here that Unit 1 focuses around families, Unit 2 is friends, 3 is wind and water, 4 is world of color, 5 is shadows and reflections, and Unit 6 is things that grow. So all 6 of these, like I mentioned before, are rich on literature and have very specific texts that align with the learning that's intended to happen in these units. 4 of the 6 of these, so units 3, 4, 5, and 6, are strongly based in science content. So each of these units takes about 4 to 5 weeks to implement. We do have sample schedules available for teachers that's showcased more in the actual training of the program, but it sort of helps to outline your school year and to know when to start and end approximately each unit. And it does leave time, and when I say that, it's typically a few days up to a week in between each unit for those buffer days. So we might have holidays that fall on an awkward day. We might have snow days, inclement weather days. So there's those buffer days in between each unit that teachers are given to sort of help catch up to extend the lesson perhaps. And then also I love those buffer weeks because it allows teachers to do those lessons, those stories, those activities that they just love doing as a teacher that isn't necessarily part of this curriculum. So, you know, this time of year, I know a lot of early educators are doing Mother's Day and perhaps Father's Day activities with their students, right? That's not a lesson in pre-K for me, but there's days that allow time to do things like that. So that's a great plus of that. And the other big point too to make here is that Unit 1 does not necessarily start on the first day of school. So we encourage teachers to allow 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even 4, to start to really create and build those relationships and those routines with students before they dive in deep to the day-to-day learning of each unit. So I'm just going to pause for a second. Is there any questions so far on anything of this that I presented? Okay, I know I can talk fast and move fast, so interrupt me, please, if that's the case. So moving on from these 6 units of study, I'll just talk briefly about the components of pre-K for me. Again, very similar to OWL. So the biggest one, oops, this is a little off center, isn't it? This should be over there. The biggest one are the read alouds. So the read alouds is, like I mentioned, those specific texts that go with each unit. The read aloud is when that text is presented to the children. From there, we have introduction to centers and centers, thinking and feedback. I'm going to go through each of these one at a time in a moment, so bear with me. Small groups, songs, wordplay, and letters, which we lovingly call SWIPL in OWL. For this program, we have songs, wordplay, letters, and numbers, which we lovingly call SWIPLin. The numbers there, and then you'll see down below too, large group math. So another important thing to note about pre-K for me is that the math curriculum, the math lessons, is written into this program. So there's no need to purchase a second program, a second curricula for math if you're adopting pre-K for me. So I mentioned if Boston Public Schools used their focus on early learning, and then also implemented building blocks, which is a separate purchased program. And we just chose to write the math right in along with this. So the math is throughout all lessons, but specifically in SWIPLin. And then it's also intentional large group activity every week as well. And then we have Let's Find Out About It, which we often refer to as LFOAI, but so if you see it written out as that, it's just Let's Find Out About It. And that's another whole group activity, which I'll explain more. And then storytelling and story acting. Storytelling and story acting also is unique to pre-K for me. It's not an OWL. And it's a component of this program that some teachers, especially when they're first piloting or first adopting this program in their classrooms, ought to leave out until they're really comfortable with implementing the other components. The storytelling, story acting is really important. We want it to happen. We want it to happen naturally and comfortably, but we don't want to force it and squeeze it into a day where it's going to potentially affect time allotted for the other components. So it's one of those things that if there's time for it, make time for it, great. If you're finding yourself stressed and something's got to go, maybe ease up on doing that every day. The other 2 pieces at the bottom, technology and outside learning and nature, are 2 other components that we also had written into pre-K for me. And they're there as optional lessons as well. The technology ones are there primarily to enhance the lessons that already exist in these other components. And then the outside learning one is all year round learning outdoors. Sometimes it's free play. Sometimes it's encouraging to look for things, hikes, walks, things like that. And sometimes it's, a formal lesson plan that's taken outdoors. So the biggest question always comes up around this is the length of your day. So all of these components are best implemented in a full day, full week program. Many Head Start programs operate that way. Many standalone pre-K programs operate that way, but we have a number that are still half day. or half week perhaps. So there is a schedule that allows for all of these components at some point during the week. In a half-day program, it just looks a little different schedule-wise. But the lessons are the same. How we implement the lessons are the same. The interactions are still, vital in all of that. It just looks a little different. So the component read aloud. This is a whole group activity. In the beginning of the year, it typically takes about 10 to 12 minutes. As the year progresses and students' stamina increases, then we see it elongating, I guess, for like 15, 18, 20 minutes, depending on the book, depending on the conversation and the interactions that are happening. So the two main goals during this time are vocabulary development and story comprehension. There's 30 core texts, and they're read multiple times. So for example, this book, Crybaby, shows up in Unit 1 under Family, and throughout the course of a week, this book is read up to 3 times. The reading each time is a little different. So while the first reading might be, the teacher sitting down with a group of students, reading it cover to cover, as you typically would a story. The second reading might have specific pauses and focus on vocabulary words. So there's a lot of prep work that goes into read alouds. It's not just choosing a book off the shelf and reading it because you think the kids will like it. It's very intentional. The vocabulary words that are in each of these books are highlighted in the lesson plans of these activities, and teachers are encouraged during the second reading to really point out those vocabulary and be very specific about using them. The third read aloud, she might leave a word out here or there, and the intent is for the children to fill it in, right? Because they've already heard it twice. So now they're starting to show their development in comprehending the story and knowing what comes next, and being able to be more interactive with it instead of sitting and listening. So these are just a couple examples. Again, some of them are from similar to those used in OWL, and some aren't. We wanted to be sure that any of the texts that we include in PreK for Me are current, meaning that you can purchase them, whether that's through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and they're also available to the main library system, because the books in our classrooms get used and loved, so being able to replace them is really important to us. From Read Aloud, we move on to Intro to Centers. This again takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and it's a whole group activity. More often than not, Read Aloud and Intro to Centers are done back to back in the same sitting. So it's not like students come to whole group and then maybe even do something, then they come back to whole group and then maybe even do something. It's not like that. It's more like they come to whole group, they have a read aloud, they do the discussion, and then we get ready to move to centers. Again, there are sometimes scheduling conflicts that can get in the way of that, but we work through those as we can. So this is just a really intentional way of breaking students out into their free play choices. So we model the activity, we model what's available for them in each space. We show examples of how to use the materials. So instead of just saying at the easel is red and blue paint, we might actually have with us at the circle time a piece of paper, some red paint, some blue paint, and model and show the students how to wipe the drips, how to paint on the paper, how much is too much, how little is too little, etc. Again, there is example script for teachers to prep with. They don't have to say it verbatim. It's just there for their, for their preparation and when they get ready to do intro to centers. If a center repeats itself from one day to the next day, then the teacher doesn't necessarily have to model all materials again. The idea being that during this time, they're introducing new activities or potentially new additions to activities every day. And this is really, during the training, we get really deep into examples of this and the benefits of this. So typically right from intro to centers, students move to centers. So this is a nice big long chunk of the student's day. In full day programs, this is at least 60 minutes long, uninterrupted. In half day programs, it's about 40 to 45 minutes uninterrupted. So during this time, students are free to move around the classroom and involve themselves in activities and materials that you've made available for them. Typically, the centers are here: blocks, library and listening, drama, which is like typically housekeeping, or if you change it over to be something different. A writing station, an art studio complete with an easel, a discovery table, and then puzzles and manipulatives. Many teachers also still have science centers, or they have, there was another center that I was thinking of that just escaped me. So my point being, just because these are the centers that we utilize during intro to centers and that we're really intentional around the materials that students have access to. However, that doesn't mean that if you have space for a science center or music, or space for a musical exploration center, that can't be included. I mean, of course, if you have access to that and space for that, then by all means include it in your spaces. So students, are free to move around. So many teachers are accustomed to, going student by student. Nicole, where would you like to play today? Marcy, where would you like to play today? Mary, where would you like to play today? In this scenario, we're saying, who wants to go to the block area? And then you allow however many can fit, typically 3 or 4 students, to go to that space. Who wants to go to housekeeping today? Who wants to go to writing today? So we dismiss by center instead of by student. This goes a little bit faster. And we find that when students are in their centers, beginning of the year, they're a little bit more excited and motivated to move around, and that's okay. But the goal being over time and over the course of the weeks that centers have these specific materials in them, they start to settle in and really engage where they're at. If a student chooses to go to a block center and they spend the entire center's time there, that's okay. Because for some reason, whatever was happening in block center that day was really motivating to them, was really intriguing to them. And that's what we want to see students doing, getting somewhere, settling with the material, and really engaging with it, as opposed to ping-ponging and spending, seconds or a minute at centers. And they do learn that only a certain number of children can attend certain spaces, right? Because of space. Block center, drama center tends to be a little bit larger. Discovery center, writing center tend to be smaller, maybe only 2 or 3 students. So we dig deeper into that in the training. Another component is thinking and feedback. This typically happens right after or soon after centers. It's another whole group activity. It's another one of those sort of optional components as well. If a teacher has the time to implement this daily, or is really comfortable and excited about implementing this daily, great. We want that to happen. If we're pressed for time and this can only happen once or twice a week, then that's okay too. There are some non-negotiable components, read aloud, intro to centers, and some components like thinking and feedback that are okay to sort of spread out a little bit and not necessarily do every single day. So thinking and feedback is getting students sort of comfortable with public speaking. Ultimately, that's like the big picture here. So we're looking at a piece of work that a student has created. Students are encouraged to notice and share details about it. They listen to each other talk about the work. Students are given a chance to ask questions or say things like, I wonder why that person has blue hair and not pink hair, or whatever. And then they offer suggestions. So many students are much more comfortable with this process of sharing their work than others, and that's fine. The same student might be interested in doing this for feedback over and over and over again, whereas another student might take all year, if ever, to get the bravery to stand up in front of their peers and receive feedback, and that's okay. The process is still there. The idea of constructive feedback, the idea of standing up in front of a group and sharing, that's really the goal of it. Small groups happens daily as well. It's about 15 to 20 minutes, and the biggest thing with small groups is that it does not happen during centers. It's a separate scheduled time of day. So unlike centers where children have freedom to go to where they want to go, a center, in small groups, students are assigned. So you might have small groups of children who have similar abilities, and you're having them all work together on something, on a lesson. Or you might sort of mix up the small groups and have students of a higher level development and students of a lower level development together and share that interaction as well. These are typically focused on literacy and math concepts, but there's also a small group for independent activities as well. If we have classrooms of 16 students, then we might have 3 small groups, one focused on the math activity, one focused on a literacy activity, and the other one doing it independent. Again, you might have one teacher in the math activity, your teacher's ed tech in a literacy activity, for example, and then the independent group is using Play-Doh, exploring books, working on puzzles, playing with magnets, things that they have freedom to just sort of explore in a space. All of the small group activities are hands-on learning experiences, not worksheets, not coloring books, not specific writing tasks or anything like that. You see a photo here of them making, I assume, a piñata, because that's a big part of one of the lessons that we have in one of the units. And then Swiplin, songs, wordplay, letters, and numbers. So this is where we start to focus more on phonological awareness. We use a lot of word games, songs, poems, predictable text. So the songs, nope, not the songs, the poems and the word games are provided through the PreK for Me website. Songs are arguably songs that your teachers already know. If they don't, we encourage them to access them through like YouTube or just different websites that have children's songs that they can hear it and learn it from. And then the predictable text, which would be a purchased material. And then the end numbers. So we also do math songs and counting games and things like that. So there's also games like letter names, or they're learning letter names and sounds, matching upper and lowercase letters, beginning and ending letter sounds, and rhyming. So this is another non-negotiable component. If you're doing PreK for Me, then this Swiplin is happening often, daily. Large group is Let's Find Out About It is my favorite. I shouldn't say that. So I love Let's Find Out About It. It's a quick whole group activity. It pulls from the core of the storybooks and the texts that are used in whichever unit it is you're studying. It provides information through the use of nonfiction text and demonstration. And it's the demonstration part of Let's Find Out About It that the students love and get so engaged in. It also emphasizes vocabulary and expands on read aloud topics, which is important, of course. But the Let's Find Out About It activities are so fun. It brings in real world materials that the students don't often get to engage with, like hair dryers and fans and umbrellas and just different things that they likely have seen before and could probably describe, but to put it into an activity where you're demonstrating a concept like wind or absorption or what is it, Marcy, when they're doing if something is see-through or if it's not.
It's translucent. Yeah. There's another one, and opaque.
Yes, thank you. So when students are learning that, they're learning this vocabulary words, and then they're seeing why something is translucent or why something is opaque. And they go home and they start using these words at home and like, Mommy, that window is translucent. And parents just get so excited. I love Let's Find Out About It. Large group math kind of speaks for itself. Again, it's something that we do. This one happens about like once a week, and then the rest of the math activities are done during those small groups. So the large group activity for math sort of introduces a math concept, and then those are built on during centers and during small group activities. And storytelling and acting, I had mentioned before, this is one of the other components that is only really done well when there's time in the schedule to really dig deep into this component. So this is different than, this is not part of an OWL, so this would be new to some folks. It's a whole group activity, and the idea being that the teacher finds time to interact one-on-one with a child and just encourages the child to tell them a story, right? And as the student is talking and telling the story sort of privately to the teacher, she's writing it down. And it could be something that happened, you know, it could be a nonfiction story. It could be a fictional story. They could just be totally making something up and the teacher's just writing it down. And we limit it, you know, to like a page and a half or so. It doesn't have to be a book. And then this story is read aloud to the whole group, right? And the author, the child, is there as well. And then we assign parts. So, okay, you be Nicole in the story, you be the blue jay in the story, you can be the mom in the story, and you can be the ball that gets hit that hits the blue jay or whatever. And so then they take on these roles and they tell the story again and they act it out. And then here's a picture of a student who took it a step farther and made props for his or her story, so that when, you know, during centers or during recess or during another storytelling acting time, they were able to not just retell the story, but really act it out with props. So this is another really fun component. Students get really engaged and they can't wait for their time, you know, their turn to tell the teacher the story. But it is one that takes time and takes comfort from all parties to really work well. The outdoor learning pieces are there. Like I mentioned, we're just integrating outdoor learning, so it provides children that opportunity to get outside. In pre-K for me, we encourage students to get outside every day. Of course, that includes recess, free play, things like that. And some of the lessons are structured hikes, walks. Some of them are more intense lesson plans, things like that. These are just some of the things that get explored through outdoor learning, through the lessons that are included. So you can see that they're all seasons, right? Insects, worms, slugs, to snow, ice, water cycles, signs of spring, sun and shadows, gardening, etc. These are just some photos of students that were exploring outside. Love this one. So I had mentioned earlier that 4 of the 6 units are based in science. So that's wind and water, world of color, shadows and reflections, and things that grow. Here's some students experimenting with wind. So they're just blowing through a straw, seeing what the force of their wind can move. The technology that's included are just recommended lessons. It's not going to make or break any part of the curriculum, but certainly if you have these technological devices or tools, then certainly there are ways to appropriately utilize them alongside some of the lessons. So the emphasis here in the technology pieces is that it's interaction between the child and the teacher, or a collaboration of peers in using the tool, right? It's not meant to be a passive tool or like a reward. You know, if you do this, then you get to use the iPad, or when you finish early, you can use this app. It's not like that at all. Instead, it's, you know, we've been talking about architecture and building a bridge. Could you make a plan of a bridge? And so this tool that this little girl is using here is the Osmo. And so what she draws on this whiteboard gets transferred onto this digital iPad. So she could draw a plan, for example, of a bridge that she wants to build. And then she could utilize the blocks to match or whatever the case may be. So you see how the tool is meant to enhance a lesson that's already created, as opposed to just being something passive available for students. Some of the tools that I know our SHU 57 was able to utilize were these digital microscopes, of course, iPads, that's biggie, Osmo and Spiro. Here's some other pictures of students using the Osmo. And these are optional. It's not required to implement pre-K for me. Using this for writing. I love this one where it says potato. I've drawn a picture here of a potato. And some students using the iPad, and it looks like epic books. So this could be part of your library and listening center and listening to books digitally. Some 3D printer ornaments. these were some other resources that are considered developmentally appropriate technology resources, which I can provide if needed. Okay, I'll leave this screen up for right now, but that's sort of like a really quick half-hour, 35-minute rundown of pre-K for me and sort of the background of it. So I'd love to answer any questions or thoughts that you might have. Erin, I'm sure you saw a lot of comparisons or a lot of similarities with OWL. So I think for teachers that are used to using OWL, transferring to this is pretty seamless. A lot of updates and lessons and things, but the overall components are very similar. So it's often a pretty easy go of it. But any other questions that I've left you with here?
Nicole, what kind of training? I know there's training coming up, but what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's we plan for 2 full days, so 8:30 to 3:30. Of course, there's a lunch break and some breaks as needed throughout. But during the training, we dive much deeper into each of these components. So we explain some of the research around why the component is there even in the first place, the purpose behind doing it, the intent of it existing, and what it looks like to implement it, right? So we do a lot of modeling, a lot of demonstration. Sometimes that's in person. We also have some video that shows it happening in the classroom, so teachers can see children interacting with the component as well. So that's a big part of the training. And then we navigate the website as well. So all the lesson plans, and actually I can show you, all the lesson plans and materials that you need to implement this are on our PreK for Me website. So that's part of the training as well, so that teachers know where to go for what. So on our early childhood education here, PreK for Me has a tab on the left-hand side. And then once you're here, it does explain some of the information that I provided today, but as you scroll down, there's some resources, math resources, technology resources, and then you get into each unit. And so each photo opens up all the materials that's needed for that unit. So that's another big part of the training as well.
Thank you.
Nicole, I know in past years in the training, and I think we've talked about it, I know that in the K for Me training, we are doing this. You've had some educators participate who are using the program so that they can also help to answer questions and provide good examples of what components look like.
Yep, we have. Are we going to do that again? Is that what are you asking? Or are you just stating that?
Yeah, I thought we were doing that again this summer, but and we can. I can help support that. Yeah. Having the teachers that are implementing this in the classroom, I mean, goes without saying, right? Because they're doing it day in and day out. So their interaction with the site, their interaction with the materials and with their students speaks for itself. So that's been a huge benefit in the past, is having them there to help deliver some of the training alongside us. It's just teacher to teacher. It's a great way to present information.
I was just going to ask, just to clarify, and Nicole, you had emailed me back the other day with a few questions that I had, which was helpful. So we're hoping to send as many teachers as we can to the August training, but of course, some are on layoff and may not be able to attend. So they would get the same information essentially by watching the training video modules. I'm sure it's not the same as being there in person, of course, but
Exactly.
or virtually in person, I should say.
Yeah, exactly, Erin. So when we presented the training last summer, we did record everything, and it's here on the site on the right-hand side. So there's 4 training videos. So the first 2 are day 1 of training, basically, and videos 3 and videos 4 are the second day, essentially, of training. And then you can see here on the side what concepts or what components each video is looking into. So intro to centers and thinking and feedback, etc. And exactly like you said, these are here, and it's the full training of the program. full disclosure, I'm not a videographer, so parts of it are fantastic and other parts are not as fantastic. It's not the same as being there live or virtually, but it's there as a resource certainly. And then we also were able to do some guidance videos, which are housed just below that. And this just dives a little bit deeper into whatever the component title is here, for teachers to use additionally as well. So I do plan and hope to record this year's training as well, and make that available as needed. So live is best, but there are options.
Are there coaching tools or fidelity tools for pre-K for me?
Good question. So I don't know that we have any posted on the site. I'm just looking quickly. When we piloted the program, there were tools that we used during that process, and can easily be made public. They're not like private or secretive or anything like that. To be honest with you, many of them were adapted from the tools that we've used before in OWL, and just made appropriate for pre-K for me. So those exist. Marcy and I are also available within the department to offer additional resources or any type of oversight or training. It's not uncommon. Well, it's not exactly common, but we have had in the past teachers take recordings of them implementing a component like Read Aloud, for example, and send it to us. And then we have like a 1 hour follow-up with, and that's available for, like, we would open that up to anybody, not just by district or anything like that, but we would say, hey, we're going to talk about Read Aloud component. If you're interested, feel free to join us. So that's been somewhat well received. We've been able to help a few teachers through that process, but it's not really widely used at this point. But we're certainly here as a resource for you and your teachers as needed. We want to make sure you've got what you need and feel comfortable doing all of it.
That's great. Thank you.
Mhm. That I'm sure you're probably familiar, Erin, but I mentioned earlier, the consumer report is housed here on the eClick site. So once you're in at the Head Start eClick site and you go to the curriculum page and the preschool curriculum page, as you scroll down, these are all the ones that they've reviewed so far. And pre-K for me is there. Oops. Gives you a quick summary, and then you can read the full review and ratings as well. So this was really great feedback for us in moving forward as we're able, as we need to update lessons or update the program for whatever reason, then this feedback will really give us information on how best to do that. And the Boston Public Schools site is a great resource as well. Like I had mentioned, their research that they've done. Let me move this screen here. So once you're here, it's bpsearlylearning.org. That's their homepage, and then you can sort of filter through to find their curricula. And this is where you'll find additional resources for their work and their research. We haven't had pre-K for me formally evaluated sort of on our to-do list. It's definitely something that I would love to see happen. But with different pandemic things and funding resources, it just hasn't happened. So we refer those interested in the research to this one from Boston Public Schools, even though it's not exactly apples to apples. But it's sort of the closest thing for us right now. Outside of our pilot classrooms that we did conduct, class observations in and ongoing assessment tools and things like that through our PEG program. But that's it. What I leave out?
Really comprehensive, Nicole. If I know that on our site, schools can also find the list of materials, and That
is
might be
exactly what I
something
was
that-
gonna mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the site, the PreK for Me site, under additional curriculum resources, it has a suggested calendar that I mentioned briefly, and the suggested schedules as well. But then it also has a visual book inventory for all units, and then a material and book list. So these are similar but different. So the book inventory, which is not what I clicked on, but that's going to show you the texts that you need for read alouds, SWPL, and math. And this one that I clicked on, which was books and materials, is going to show you just that materials, right? Paint, puzzles, you know, everything that you need to implement this lessons in each unit. And it has the math books broken out, some narrative text broken out, things like that. So as they all will bring you to some type of Google document or Google Drive. So unit 1, I'm going to turn my video off for just a moment because it's affecting my connection here. So unit 1 materials will pop up this list. So you can see everything that you would need. And some things you'll need to replace year after year, you know, they're disposable. Other things can be saved, which if you have storage, if you have storage, it can be saved. But I'm thinking too, like in unit 1 family, I believe, the drama center goes from being a housekeeping center, to a laundromat, for example. And so some teachers or classrooms purchase washers and dryers, right, that are child size and pretend play. Others create them every year out of big boxes, which is great. Students love having pretend play with that. So those types of things is what I mean by you might need to replace the box washer and dryer every year, but if you put the money towards, you know, a wooden reusable one, then that furniture is there and longer lasting. A lot of these materials too are arguably in public pre-K classrooms, regardless of, or early childhood settings, regardless of what curriculum or program you're implementing. So some things are, oh yeah, we have that, no problem, we've already got that, check, check, check. Other things are, oh, I need a washer and dryer. Yep, probably figure out how we're going to do that. Or, oh, we need a box fan to show wind. Okay, yep, better make sure we get that. So things like that. A lot of things too can be donated from families. So like when the drama center turns into a grocery store, you know, empty cereal boxes, empty containers, those types of things can be donated as needed. Some of these say OWL at the top or building blocks. Just ignore that. It's just the same for pre-K for me. So I get questions sometimes on that. And then at the very bottom two is a classroom material list and a classroom equipment inventory, which is more of a checklist. So I have it, I need it, etc. And this is organized by center. So block center, dramatic play center, table toys, things like that. Again, a lot of these you'll likely already have regardless of what you've been doing all along. Other things you might need to get. Thank you for mentioning that, Leanne, because I did have that on my mind to show, and I understand.
Nicole, do you also really quickly want to talk about the parent newsletters?
Yes. So
New.
Marcy, God bless you. I'll let you talk about that, Marcy.
Okay.
These are your baby.
It's true. Okay, so on the right side of each unit overview page, when you click on that, there is a family newsletter, and they have been translated into, I think, 10 different languages, 10 of the most common languages that we have in our schools. And so when you click on that, it's basically a 2-page newsletter that you can send home to parents. It kind of brings the homeschool connection. It has the spotlight books for that unit, an overview of what's happening in the classroom, and you can, I think, actually, I don't think you can change them. There is a song, wordplay, and letter that generally, in my experience, I've thrown in some of the ones that I think the kids really learn quickly and really enjoy and can sing with their parents, so we can do that at home. Other titles that we use throughout that unit are there as well. And there are pictures, authors' names, and titles, so they can find them at their local library if they want to. And then on the back page are ways they can bring the learning home. And so they're hopefully, or the attempt was to make the activities at home really correlate with the ones that are being done in the classroom, but also very accessible and kind of hitting all of the learning domains through all of them. So I think there's 3, there may be more in some units. And then some tips and parenting, just, you know, a word to families, some tips on reading with your child or getting ready for kindergarten, or, you know, bedtime routines. It changes at each month. And these are all translated. So they look the same, they're just in a different language for everybody. So you can print those off and send those home. Nicole, I'm gonna let you read that one. You are muted.
Like Mercy said, these are available in every unit. So the examples here are just from Unit 1 family. But as you move through, you'll see that they're there for all of them. So I think that was all that I had on my list to share with folks. And your questions were perfect. So I'm glad that you asked those, because I wanted to be as beneficial and meaningful for all of you. So like you had mentioned, Erin, we'll be hosting the training for PreK for Me August 9th and 10th. It'll be virtual in this way, so we can essentially have as many folks as interested attend. There's really no limit. I don't think we'll reach the limit, put it that way. Hundreds. so I'm optimistic and looking forward to that time with folks. Virtual platforms, although are incredibly useful, can be tricky. So we'll make sure that we integrate plenty of time for interaction and conversation during that time, as well as breaks and things like that, so that folks can get the most out of it. But, you know, like I said, after the training dates moving forward, putting this to practice in the classroom with students is another ballgame. So we always would prefer that folks reach out to us for clarifications. Can you check this? What do you think of this? I'm curious about this, than assuming. So that's why we're here. We're definitely going to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and confident implementing it. So that's all. Thank you, Erin and Lori, for coming. If you don't have any other questions, I'm not going to make you stick around.
Thank you.
Helpful.
It's amazing. It's so very accessible and well organized. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of hard work. We partnered. I didn't do all the work in any way, shape, or form. All that credit goes to the folks listed here on the right-hand side for their organization and expertise. And so yeah, we get a lot of good feedback regarding that. So I appreciate that, Lori. Thank you.